Hello. We are here. No. Just because I say hello doesn't mean you have to bark. We are here, Bam and I, to read you chapter 3. This chapter, let's recap chapter 2. Lucy finds the wardrobe. She goes into a land called Narnia, which is why this book is called The Chronicles of Narnia. And she meets Mr. Tumnus. He is the faun. He's half man, half goat. He tells her that what he had intended to do is turn her over to the White Witch, and terrible things are going to happen to him if he doesn't, but he does the right thing and he lets her go. At the end of the chapter, she pops out and she goes to see her siblings. Let's see how they take it, okay? Chapter 3 is called Edmund and the Wardrobe. Here's your little picture. No, Bam. Shush. We're reading now, okay? Lucy ran out of the Lucy ran out of the empty room into the passage and found the other three. It's all right, she repeated. I've come back. What on earth are you talking about, Lucy? Asked Susan. Why, said Lucy in amazement. Haven't you all been wondering where I was? So you've been hiding, have you? Said Peter. Poor old Lou, hiding and nobody noticed. You'll have to hide longer than that if you want people to start looking for you. But I've been away for hours and hours, said Lucy. The others all stared at one another. Batty it, said Edmund, tapping his head. Quite batty. That means he's calling her crazy. What do you mean, Lou? Asked Peter. What I said, answered Lucy. It was just after breakfast when I went into the wardrobe, and I've been away for hours and hours, and had tea, and all sorts of things have happened. Don't be silly, Lucy, said Susan. We've only just come out of that room a moment ago, and you were there then. She's not being silly at all, said Peter. She's just making up a story for fun, aren't you, Lou? And why shouldn't she? No, Peter, I'm not, she said. It's a magic wardrobe, and there's a wood inside it, and it's snowing, and there's a faun and a witch, and it's called Narnia. Come and see. The others did not know what to think, but Lucy was so excited that they all went back into the room. She rushed ahead of them, flung open the door of the wardrobe, and cried, Now go in and see for yourselves. Why, you goose, said Susan, putting her head inside and pulling the fur coats apart. It's just an ordinary wardrobe. Look, there's the back of it. Then everybody looked in and pulled the coats apart, and Lucy saw herself, a perfectly ordinary wardrobe. There was no wood, no snow, only the back of the wardrobe with hooks on it. Peter went in and rapped his knuckles on it to make sure that it was solid. A jolly good hoax, Lou, he said as he came out again. You really had us taken in, I must admit. We half believed you. But it wasn't a hoax at all, said Lucy. Really and truly. It was different a moment ago. Honestly, it was, I promise. Come, Lou, said Peter. That's going a bit far. You've had your joke. Hadn't you better drop it now? Lucy grew very red in the face and tried to say something, though she hardly knew what she was trying to say, and burst into tears. For the next few days she was very miserable. She could have made up with the others quite easily at any moment if she had brought herself to say that the whole thing was a story made up for fun. But Lucy was a very truthful girl, and she knew that she was really in the right, and she could not bring herself to say this. The others, who thought she was telling a lie, and a silly lie too, made her very unhappy. The two elder ones did it without meaning to do it, but Edmund could be spiteful, and on this occasion he was spiteful. Spiteful means doing something that you know is mean, and like he's doing it on purpose to upset her. He sneered and jeered at Lucy and kept on asking her if she had found any new countries in other cupboards all over the house. What made it worse was that these days ought to have been delightful. The weather was fine, and they were outdoors all morning to night, bathing, fishing, climbing trees, and lying in the grass. But Lucy could not properly enjoy any of it, so things went on until the next wet day. That day, when it came to the afternoon, there was still no sign of a break in the weather, so they decided to play hide and seek. Susan was it, and as soon as the others scattered to hide, Lucy went to the room where the wardrobe was. She did not mean to hide in the wardrobe, because she knew it would only set the others talking again about the whole wretched business. But she did want to have one more look inside it, for by this time she was beginning to wonder herself whether Narnia and the faun had been a dream. The house was so large and complicated and full of hiding places that she thought she would have time to have one look inside the wardrobe and then hide somewhere else. But as soon as she reached it, she heard steps in the passage outside. And then there was nothing for it but to jump in the wardrobe and hold the door closed behind her. She did not shut it properly because she knew it was very silly to shut oneself into a wardrobe, even if it's not a magic one. Now the steps she heard were those of Edmund, and he came into the room just in time to see Lucy vanishing into the wardrobe. At once he decided to get in himself, not because he thought it a particularly good place to hide, but because he wanted to go on teasing her about the imaginary country. He opened the door, and there were coats hanging up as usual, and a smell of mothballs, and darkness, and silence, and no sign of Lucy. She thinks I'm Susan come to catch her, said Edmund to himself, and so she's keeping very quiet in the back. He jumped in and shut the door, forgetting it was a very foolish thing to do. Then he began feeling about for Lucy in the dark. He had expected to find her in a few seconds and was surprised when he did not. He decided to open the door again and let in some light, but he could not find the door either. He didn't like this at all and began groping wildly in every direction, and he even shouted, "Lucy! Lou! Where are you? I know you're here." There was no answer, and Edmund noticed at his own voice a curious sound. Not the sound you expect in a cupboard, like an echo in a cabinet, but the kind of open air sound. He also noted that he was unexpectedly cold, and then he saw the light. "Thank goodness," said Edmund. "The door must have swung open on its own accord." He forgot all about Lucy and went towards the light, which he thought was the open door of the wardrobe, but instead of finding himself stepping out into the spare room, he found himself stepping out from the shadow of some thick, dark fir trees into an open place in the middle of a wood. There was a crisp, dry snow under his feet and more snow lying on the branches of the trees. Overhead there was a pale blue sky, and the sort of sky you see on a fine winter morning. Straight ahead of him he saw dark tree trunks in the sun, just rising, very red and clear. Everything was perfectly still, as if he were the only living creature in that country. There was not even a robin or a squirrel among the trees, and the wood stretched as far as he could see in every direction. He shivered. He now remembered that he had been looking for Lucy, and also how unpleasant he had been to her about the imaginary country, which now turned out to not have been imaginary at all. He thought he must be somewhere quite close, and so he shouted, "Lucy! Lucy! I'm here too! Edmund!" There was no answer. "She's angry of all the things I've been saying lately," thought Edmund, and though he did not like to admit that he had been wrong, he also did not much like being alone in this strange, cold, quiet place. So he shouted again, "I say, Lou, I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I know now you were right all along. Do come out." Still there was no answer. "Just like a girl," said Edmund to himself, "sulking somewhere and won't accept an apology." He looked around him again and decided he did not much like this place, and almost made up his mind to go home when he heard, far off in the wood, a sound of bells. He listened, and the sound came nearer and nearer, and at last there swept into sight a sled drawn by two reindeer. The reindeer were about the size of Shetland ponies, and their hair was so white that even the snow hardly looked white compared to them. Their branching horns were gilded and shone with something on fire as the sun caught them. Their harness was of scarlet leather and covered with bells. On the sled, driving the reindeer, sat a fat dwarf who would have been about 3 feet high if he had been standing. He was dressed in a polar bear's fur, and on his head he wore a red hood with a long gold tassel hanging down from its point. His huge beard covered his knees and served him instead of a rug. But behind him, on a much higher seat in the middle of the sled, sat a very different person. A great lady, taller than any woman Edmund had ever seen. She was also covered in white fur up to her throat, and held a long, straight, golden wand in her right hand, and wore a golden crown on her head. Her face was white, not merely pale, but white like snow or paper or icing sugar, except for her very red mouth. It was a quite beautiful face in other respects, but proud and cold and stern. The sled was a fine sight when it came sweeping towards Edmund, with its bells jingling and the dwarf cracking its whip and the white snow flying up on each side. "Stop!" said the lady, and the dwarf pulled the reindeer up so sharply that they almost sat down. Then they recovered themselves and stood, chomping their bits and blowing. In the frosty air, the breath coming out of their nostrils looked like smoke. "And what, pray, are you?" said the lady, looking hard at Edmund. My name's Edmund," said Edmund rather awkwardly. He did not like the way she looked at him. The lady frowned. Is that how you address a queen? She asked, looking sterner than ever. I beg your pardon, your majesty. I didn't know, said Edmund. Not know the Queen of Narnia? She cried. Ha! You shall know us better hereafter. But I repeat, what are you? Please, your majesty, said Edmund. I don't know what you mean. I'm at school. At least I was. It's the holidays now. Oh, that's the end of the chapter. It ends abruptly, which means quickly. Bam. Do you like that chapter? Proud of you for not barking at a bird or anything. That's cool. Okay. So Edmund's in Narnia and he's met the witch. Oh, I printed out pictures. Let's see them. 2 pictures must be from their drawings that I found, and I like them a lot. One's a little small. I'll show you that one first. Notice the nice reindeer. Here's Edmund. Here's our dwarf, and here's the queen. This picture, I don't know what this is from. Maybe it was a cartoon movie remake of this, but she has a golden crown and the golden wand, just like the book says. But as you'll see in the movie version, which I love, and I love the way they make her look, but I didn't notice this when I was watching the movie because I hadn't read the book in so long. But this is her. The actress's name is Tilda Swinton. She's pretty cool. And if you'll notice, in the movie, her crown is made of ice. She's the ice queen, snow queen, whatever. And here's a bigger version, a close-up. This one's cool. Oh, John's home. Bam, bam. Close up. Bam, ham. Bam, ham. We're making a movie. Oh, goodness. He's going to keep barking at me. Where's the dwarf? Okay, I'll stop. I'll make another video with the questions. Can you see the baby? He's a good guard dog. He is. Now he's going to cry a little bit because he knows it's John. He's excited. Okay, hope you like this chapter. It's getting good. Okay, bye.